Welcome, everybody. All right, we're talking about deeper human truths. Research suggests that insight is one of the processes of change in psychology. And so this show is a lot about human insight. And the key is understanding what an insight really is and what makes it helpful and how to translate that learning into real sustained growth. So, insight in psychotherapy is defined in a whole lot of different ways. But most experts agree it's a new way of understanding your experience, which resonates emotionally. And it's not a thought, but a discovery that reverberates in your body, in your life, in your being. And when a dawning insight is then put into new words, it can revise your self-narratives and your beliefs. And it can invigorate you. But it's important to recognize that insight is not just an intellectual exercise. So if you're simply using your mind to analyze yourself or rework a familiar story, it may be interesting, but it won't be transformative. Insight requires experiential learning, which is where we learn most everything in our life. Some insights arise from the bottom up, but from an experience first, which is then put into words and it's understood in the mind. So that means we frame it up in words and then it sets in our mind. And these insights can emerge out of a surprising experience, doing something new, turning inwards, directly tracking your thoughts, your feelings, your reactions, or your behavior in the moment. For example, when you look at what a strength is, and someone says, "Oh no, I'm not that strong." No, 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 no. You want to say, "Yeah, you are a nice person. You are a good person." And you want to observe that and you want to stay with that because that insight will help that other person, even if they just don't want to hear it. Insights can also come from the top down, starting with a why question or linking present to past and then sensing whether it lands emotionally in your being. It's very important to facilitate change through insights, and this is a very very ambiguous topic, insight, and so it's really hard to encompass it all in words. But true insights that are new, experiential, and resonate emotionally change our internal landscape in important ways and motivate new behaviors. Whenever, for example, I gain insights on marriage, that invigorates me because I'm working with people in marriage all the time and I'm trying to save those marriages for the children. Even if two people are fairly unhealthy, I want to make them healthy. And so finding new ways to invigorate that marriage is going to create a lot of insight for them. And that insight comes from the work that I do to search for that. And our life, if we want to have meaning, is a continuous search for insight. So insight, once again, is a process of discovery, and it messes up your old narratives and loosens up our thinking, and it tends to increase cognitive flexibility. For example, many people get very, very upset when their children, their spouse come at them and say, "You're always a jerk. You never do this. You never do that, blah, 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 blah." And you want to correct them. You want to correct them. You want to go back at them and attack them for attacking you. But if you really think about it, if your children or your spouse are coming at you in a very strong way and saying you always or you never, what they're really trying to say is how important it is to communicate with you and how difficult you make it for them to communicate with you, that they have to go to this degree in their mind to get you to tune in and listen. That is what they're really saying. They're also saying, "You're a very important person in my life, or I wouldn't be working so hard to communicate to you." But God forbid you care about how much they value you by the way they're communicating with you, and what you want to do is attack them for attacking you. That's what most people do. But insight is something that you will not allow yourself to go beneath the surface. And if you can go beneath the surface of a lot of things in this life, you're going to discover that what you believe is not necessarily the truth. It is not necessarily the way things are, but it's the way you've had to make things to be. And we live in those narratives. And when we're listening to other people, let's say you think somebody is a total jerk, you're going to listen to every word and everything they do and everything they say, every way they talk, all the tone, all the inclinations that they have, and you're going to wrap it into you are a jerk. You're going to search through their words, through their behaviors, through their tones, through the way they talk to you, and you are going to filter the fact that they are a jerk even if 98% of the time they are not a jerk. You're going to hold on to the 2% to validate that I'm right. You are a jerk. That's how our brain operates. It stilts towards cognitive bias. To understand and feel a sense of agency and empowerment, you have to get beyond your typical surface way of taking life in. When painful feelings haven't been named, complex experiences haven't been integrated, we're sitting with unresolved conflicts and behaviors that run on automatic. So, for instance, many people that are traumatized live as victims and they perpetually communicate as victims and they perpetually manipulate with guilt and shame because they've been traumatized. But do they know they do that? No. But if you confront them with the fact that they live as a victim, now you are beginning to work with real insight. Now, this is the major goal of why people go to counseling, is to get different views and a different understanding of what makes them tick and what those behaviors are that they live on the surface with and why they're living with them. We're not responsible for how people treat us or how people choose to hear us. It's external factors and social contexts. We often persist with protective behaviors that are no longer adaptive. And these safety behaviors play an important role in keeping us stuck. But with insight, it can also reveal our values and point us in a new direction. One of an early insight that some people have is understanding the rules and why the rules are there. And suddenly, when we're confused and distressed, we understand that, hey, these rules may not be the rules. These rules may have a reason to be these rules. And what we have to understand before we challenge the rules is understand why the rules are there and what purpose they serve, because that gives you insight. What you have to understand also in this life is that relationships matter more to you and more to all of us than any possession you have. Your relationships are the most invaluable thing that you have in this life. Those memories that you leave behind are going to be the memories that other people carry forward. Now, deep psychological insights uncover hidden rules of the mind. And when you understand insights and gather more insights, what you do is you invite better and stronger and more calm and intellectual and truly exploratory relationships. Insights explain why we feel, how we think, and why we act the way we do. And these discoveries help us make sense of our lives and helps us navigate our way through our life in a very open way. It allows us to be in the moment, which is a very important thing. There are many hidden patterns of the mind. Psychologically shows that much of what we do is driven by invisible forces. And there's deep insights into human behavior. Number one, memory is a sketch. It's not a video. We do not record memories like a camera. We record memories through sensory perceptions. Instead, every time we remember an event, we rewrite the story. Our minds fill in missing parts, and this means our view of the past changes over time. Because anything that we don't know, our mind will fill in the gap with what it believes. and that becomes a memory. So memory as human beings is often a sketch. Now, many people take great pride in their memory, but they have to understand that memory is only a perception. It is not a full truth. The other thing that we need to understand about human beings is social pain is real pain. Our brains process social rejection exactly like physical injury. The same parts of the nervous system light up when we feel left out or hurt. And this explains why we crave connection and belonging. But it also explains suicide because suicide is pain management. When your back is broken and there's no medication to fix it, there's no way to fix it. You're just going to be in this pain the rest of your life. Many people find it, I just can't live with that. I can't live with that like that. And so it's the same thing with emotional pain. They get in so much pain, they don't know how to escape it. And so what they do is they choose suicide. Also, another thing to understand about human beings is multitasking is a myth. We cannot focus on two hard tasks at once. The brain has to shift gears back and forth. This slows us down, this causes mistakes, and this tires our mind. Multitasking is not part of the brain. The brain will divert attention from one thing to the next to the next. It will pivot, but it does not multitask. The other thing you have to understand about our human brain is emotions drive our decisions. We think logically, but feelings rule our choices because ultimately you're likely going to do what you feel before you do what makes sense. That's why people have affairs. They do what they feel. Many people, that's why we have arguments in marriage. That's why we have violations of integrity constantly because we do what we feel. Your feelings are much stronger than your logic. That's why we have to find emotional reasons to do logical things. And the more we develop strong emotional reasons to do logical things, the better our life becomes. Many people think their mind is constantly analyzing the world because they're curious. Often, deep thinking is actually a survival skill. And that is because the life that you live requires you to think deeply. If you're someone, let's say, like an inventor, let's say, like someone like an Elon Musk, you have to be a deep thinker. Your whole life is based on deep thinking. Your whole survival, your whole success, your whole being is based on deep thinking. And therefore, you're going to project ahead and you're going to find answers that are far more layers than what most people are willing to look through. And that is because you as a person have decided that that is an important thing. Many people also have to understand that there is a radar for peacemakers. Children who grow up needing to soothe others learn to read faces, moods, and tones. This is called hypervigilance. And the brain stays on high alert to predict danger. And so what we have to understand is that we read our environment, we read others emotionally. We may equip ourselves with logic, but we operate by our feelings. And so logic and feelings means that you have to have a good emotional intelligence to be able to steer your logic in directions that are good for human beings, good for your family, good for your life, good for your integrity, and good for every relationship that you have and every endeavor that you go on. But if you don't incorporate emotions into what you do, most things that you do logically are going to die on the vine or are going to be circumvented by emotional action. Fear is also a control factor. And if you think of the DSM-5, and every DSM before it, the Axis 1 diagnoses, the ones that we make up as human beings, fear, anxiety, depression, obsessive compulsive disorder. All of those coping skills are derived from the need to control things we cannot control. And so what people do is they will cope with the need to control things they cannot control through anxiety or depression or OCD. They're all coping skills, and they're all unhealthy coping skills with the need to control things you cannot control. Overthinking is a way to feel in control. By predicting what might go wrong, the mind tries to project itself from surprise and pain. And that means that we are overthinking because we have no faith that good things could happen. And we have no faith that in the moment, in the present that we're in, we will navigate accordingly in whatever events we have in our life. All right, we're going to take a quick break and then we're going to come right back. There are key characteristics to strong human insight. The non obvious. What that does is reveal something that wasn't immediately apparent. There's also human centered. That means it's rooted in understanding that people and their perspectives, and that people are a moving target, and people are filled with contradictions. And people also are often very selfishly motivated. Actionable things. It provides a clear direction for strategic decisions, innovation, and communication. Here's the other thing: decision making. People that are able to make decisions have character, and that character allows people to learn how to love them based on their decisions. The more decisive a person is, the easier it is to love them. You know, there's also relevancy that is tied to deep human insight, and it connects to a specific problem or an opportunity or a goal. But it's very emotional, very important for emotional resonance that taps into underlying feelings and desires. And when you're able to tap into underlying feelings and desires, you can start an engine that is very powerful. For instance, if for instance the people that oppose the crazy ass liberals, progressives that are out there in this world, the people that are grounded in common sense and logic, if they finally get a foothold and start kicking these people's ass off the radar and get back to leading and get back to the majority of people living peaceful lives, if we could get back to that, if people would finally resonate with kicking these people's ass off the radar and dealing with only people that have common sense and care about the human race, what would happen is we will change things. But instead, what happens is people with common sense sit back and allow people to just reel and reel and reel out and do enormous amounts of damage. There's many different ways to have human insights. It can be characterized based on focus and the methods used to uncover. Needs-based insights, understanding unmet or latent needs that people may not even consciously be aware of. And those insights often drive the creation of entirely new things and new services, or embellish things that are already there. Motivational insights uncover the underlying drivers and aspirations that influence people's choices and behaviors. These insights are critical and crucial for effective marketing and engagement. Behavioral insights what they do is they identify patterns and triggers and how people act, how people make decisions, how people interact with products and services and environments. And these insights inform design and user experience. For instance, I used to work for an innovator, a guy who created new things, an inventor. And what he did was he invented what's called the gravity rack. And the gravity rack was the top shelf for 2 liter bottles that when you pulled one of the 2 liter bottles down off the top shelf in the grocery store, the next one came down. Well, then what he eventually did was invent the gravity racks for the coolers in the 7-Elevens and in the convenience stores. And what that did was every time you pulled a bottle out, it would frame up the shelf back to the way it should be instead of somebody having to correct it. And so those gravity racks made him a multimillionaire and that innovated the soft drink industry and created the ability for them to make enormous amounts of money because people did not have to reach to the back of the shelf to find their soda. Also, there's a thing called attitudinal insights, understanding people's beliefs, their values, their perceptions, their opinions about topics and brands and experiences. These insights guide communication and brand positioning. There's also cultural and contextual insights, recognizing the influence of social norms, cultural values, environmental factors on human behavior. These insights are vital for global strategies and understanding diverse audience. And then there's emotional insights. That delves into the feelings, the anxieties, the joys, the frustrations that shape people's experiences and relationships. These insights drive emotional connection and loyalty. And then there's journey-based insights, mapping and understanding the end-to-end experiences people have, identifying pain points, moments of delight, opportunities of improvement across a journey. But it's very important to understand how to uncover human insights. Human insights is the desire to look deeper. It's the desire to understand that if we are watching the same commercial on television over and over and over and over again, we are likely to buy that product or something around that product or develop a need around that product simply because our brain is so influenced by repetitive and continuous commercials over and over and over again. Those repetitive messages continuously will hypnotize your brain and convince your brain to follow certain paths. That's why if you're going to attach yourself to some crazy ass thing like PBS or CNN or whatever the latest MSNBC thing is, what's going to happen is whatever the programming is on those kind of stations is going to warp your brain into thinking that their truth is the truth. And that's the real sad thing about it. You lose your objectivity. You lose your intuition because the brain is lazy and it will go into automatic thought because I just don't have to worry about these things anymore. I've already made up my mind. People that continuously use their brain are likely going to live a full and rich life and also be much healthier because they're continuously looking for deeper and deeper insight. If you're going to be an effective parent, if you're going to be an effective spouse, and if you're going to run a business, if you're going to be a manager, without insight, you are worthless as tits on a boar hog. You have got to strengthen yourself with insight. Insight is what you need to constantly strive for. Providing a deeper understanding of markets and competition is very, very important when you have a business. Creating a place, marking a territory or a way, carving a way that your business meets people's needs differently than other businesses is very important. Distinguishing yourself as a human being is very important. And what may be important to you today may not be important to you tomorrow. And so understanding that as human beings is very important. Understanding trends in human beings is very important. We also are often looking for the aha moment. Insights often emerge through a process of synthesis and intuition, which can be unpredictable. If you look at the fact that in human psychology and in relationships, for instance, if you look at a baby in its first year of life is deciding how safe am I with these two people and on this planet and in this family. And based on their evaluation in that first year, do they understand my cry? Do they understand why I'm crying? Why my face looks like this? Why my body looks like this? The more that people are able to interpret a baby's needs, the safer the baby becomes. These idiots that go, well, you just need to cry it out. What they're not understanding is they're telling the baby, you're not safe with me and you're not safe in this world. And so, understanding that as human beings, at different ages and different times, we take things in differently, and that marks us for the rest of our lives. For instance, if you've been traumatized, you are likely going to operate with victim themes. You're often going to operate compartmentalizing, meaning I'm going to delude myself to believe that we did not have this argument today, and I'm just going to go on about my business and go to work and act like the person I am at work and forget the fact that I had a big fight with my spouse. And I go into and it's easy when you have trauma to go into that little world and just box yourself off. But what you have to understand is your brain goes through life experientially, taking things in and learning how to deal with them. And everybody is built differently. If you want to be a person of deep intuition and deep connection, you have to be a person who is interested in understanding rather than being right. The dumbest people on the planet, the most destructive human beings on this planet, are the ones who have the innate desire to be right about everything. And it's very sad. They are the most destructive, leaderless, integrityless, hard to relate to, nastiest people on the planet. If you're married to one, you're trapped in the worst possible nightmare trying to cater to their stupid, ugly ass codependently. What you have to understand is healthy relationships are based on understanding. I am willing to hear your perception. I am willing to understand your perception. I am not here to disagree with your perception. I'm here to understand it. It doesn't matter if I agree with it. If I want to have a relationship with you, I need to understand it. That's what marriage is based on. It's not being right, it's based on understanding. And if you have that, a lot of decisions are very, very obvious. If you want to have intuition, you have to have a desire to cultivate a deep understanding of people by putting yourself in their shoes and seeing the world from their perspective. That is called empathy. When people have empathy, they become a very, very valuable person in this life because they're not just living in their world, they're willing to put themselves in other people's shoes and understand the world from them. And that creates relationships, which creates the value that they have in this life. If you're an old person without relationships, you're just going to be a lonely old person. If you're a person who cultivates relationships through empathy, you are going to surround yourself with resources and people for the rest of your life. But you also have to be an active listener and you have to make observations. You want to pay close attention to what people say and do, both explicitly and implicitly. That means you're willing to track. That means you're willing to say, okay, so what you're telling me is this. Oh, I understand what you're saying. Is this what you mean? Tracking with people is a very, very important thing to lead you down the path of finding out what insight really can offer you. Going beyond the surface, don't rely solely on readily available data. Employ quantitative research to uncover deeper motivations and contexts. That's the brilliant part of what AI has offered us. It's offered us a whole lot of new insight into all kinds of different questions about human beings, life, the planet, the universe, and all truths that we tend to operate with in this life. You also want to have, if you want to be a deeply intellectual person with great insight, you have to employ a variety of research methods. You cannot depend on one TV channel to give you every answer to your life to validate your stupid perspectives on everything. You need to look beyond that. You need to look for deeper answers. And I have a feeling that many people turn to social media and the internet to find those things, but what they end up finding is unresearched information where people are giving opinions as if they're facts. And that's where we get gravely misled. There are many celebrities, many people out there who believe that their opinion is a fact and they communicate like their opinion is a fact, and then people believe that their opinion is a fact and operate with that knowledge. And some people are too lazy to ever change it because it validates their own perspective and they just don't want to get away from that. But if you want to be a deeper intellectual person, you need to be looking for what is best. What is the best answer? Not what is the right answer. What is the best answer? You also want to challenge your assumptions if you want to have intuition. Be aware of your own biases. Actively question preconceived notions. If you can do that, you are going to rise above 95% of the human race. That is a big deal. That is intellect. You don't have to get a Harvard education. God only knows to get a Harvard education. Some stupid Middle Eastern idiots out there teaching you about the Muslim faith and how to be a ingrate. But the bottom line is, now that you're paying $100,000 for your education at some known degree place, you're likely going to get a very biased opinion of the way life is. What you want to do is, if you want to be a real intellect, is you need to challenge everything that you are taught continuously. Knowledge is an ongoing venture. You also want to iterate and validate. Continuously test and refine your insights through further research and real world application. That's why, like in the work of marriage family therapy, you have to continuously look for deeper meaning, deeper reasons, deeper understanding. The main reason that people get divorced, that relationships don't work out, is incompatibility. Now, you can be incompatible in many different ways, but there's insight for you. And it took a lot of knowledge and research to finally understand that. Communicate insights effectively. That makes you a very intellectual person because you're willing to share things in a clear, compelling, actionable way that resonates with other people. You're also willing to look for people that need the knowledge that you are offering. If you embed the value of human understanding throughout your whole life, if you make yourself as a parent into somebody that is into understanding, if you make yourself as a spouse into understanding, as a boss into understanding, as a business owner into understanding, you are going to be successful just from that premise. You also have to understand that we as human beings need ethical considerations, prioritize the well-being of people. If you're not able to prioritize the well-being of other people, not just yourself, you're not going to be a person of deep human insight. All right, we're going to take another break and we're going to come right back. Welcome back, everybody. All right, we're talking about human intuition. Human behavior arises from instincts, emotions, learned responses. Though we often view our choices as rational, psychology shows that many are shaped by unconscious forces and hidden biases. And there's many human insights that examine thought, emotion, memory, social connection that shape who we are and illustrate how we interplay between our brain's wiring and our lived experience. Here's some things you need to understand about a healthy human being. Talking to yourself out loud enhances focus and problem solving. It also transforms thought into self-guided instruction. The other thing is messy handwriting often signals rapid thinking. Ideas move faster than the pen. Also, our brain detects negative words faster than positive ones, and a remnant of our survival instinct to avoid danger. So we're constantly scoping for negative things in our environment, especially words that come from people that we commonly interact with. The other thing is to understand about being a human being and understanding intuition is multitasking reduces efficiency, shifting focus drains cognitive resources more than people realize. The other thing that I've learned, because I'm constantly writing when people are talking, doodling while listening improves memory retention by keeping the brain engaged just enough to prevent drifting. The other thing as a human being, mild fatigue increases creativity by loosening mental filters, allows unusual ideas to surface. Here's a weird one. Thinking in a second language can make decisions more rational by reducing emotional interference. People who talk less often notice more. Silence sharpens perception and empathy. Here's another thing. Our brains are often wired to prioritize threats over rewards. So explaining why criticism often outweighs praise. Also, the act of writing goals turns abstract ideas into tangible commitments, improving your achievement rates. These are huge things about understanding human behavior and having an intuitive understanding of what makes humans operate, what enhances human operation. Social interaction activates the same pain circuits as physical injury, making emotional hurt biologically real. However, laughter with a partner strengthens emotional bonds through endorphins and shared perspectives. Also, a racing heartbeat can be misread as romantic attraction due to overlapping arousal signals. Facial expressions also influence emotional. So smiling can genuinely boost mood by activating happiness pathways. The people that focus on becoming happier, becoming smiling, projecting a more positive way of being are going to have many, many, many more positive reactions and transactions in this life. They are going to go a long way because they make great effort into being positive. Empathy, if you want to think about it, is rooted in the mirror neurons, which allow us to feel others' emotions as if they are our own. That's a powerful thing. We have that ability as human beings, but many people are narcissistic and want to believe that everybody feels like they do. If you're going to relate everything to how you feel, if you're with people that once you start telling a story have to top your story, that's called a narcissist. You need to run as far as you can from these turds because they're never going to change. This stuff has been set in their being from the beginning, and it's there and it will grow and it will always be there because they've integrated it into who they are. You know, Here's another weird thing. Visualization can strengthen skills by activating neural circuits similar to real practice. Reading fiction, believe it or not, enhances empathy by letting readers experience other lives and other emotions. Here's another weird one. Daydreaming fosters problem solving and creatively by allowing the brain to explore possibilities without constraint. You know, it's very important to understand what makes people tick. Our behavior in this world, digital overstimulation, it reduces attention span, training in the brain for novelty instead of depth. So the brain's always looking for entertainment value rather than the depth of the information. That's the day and age we live in. That's why social media is so powerful because people want instant answers. The other thing is uh, silence makes people uneasy because it exposes inner thought. Conversation often fills that void. People, the brain, when you're around somebody who is very slow and deliberate in how they talk, your brain's going to be filling in the gaps for that person. That person is going to feel very unheard, very disrespected. Because if there's too much time, a person will go back into their own brain and form their own dialogues, their own memories, their own perceptions about everything about their interaction with you. Here's another weird one. People who walk quickly tend to live longer, exhibit higher baseline energy and optimism. Here's another thing about night owls. They often challenge authority and favor independent thinking. It's really important to understand as human beings, especially in relationships, that loneliness weakens our immunity, increases inflammation, provides social connections biological importance. You become desperate when you're lonely. And people that are lonely never really fully understand how desperate they are until they end up making mistakes. It's better to understand what your loneliness is, what is driving it, and what you can do to fill it. And what you can do to get out of your brain is to stimulate alternate perceptions, hearing, feeling, touching, smelling. Those are things that would be very, very important to do to divert your attention away from ruminating. The other thing is people subconsciously mirror the body languages of those people they like, and they build an unspoken rapport by the way they handle their body. And you can always tell by the way people mirror each other and the way people pace each other at the way the other person is talking as to how well they're going to relate together. Here's the weird one. Shared laughter between friends deepens trust and emotional connection. Many people are very serious in this life and lack laughter. The more laughter you have, the healthier you become. It is a very deep, deep need, laughter, because it tells us that everything's okay, I am safe, and I can afford to laugh. You know, things like interactions with strangers, like a smile or a greeting, can also boost your happiness and your sense of belonging. It's very important to understand that we as human beings are very, very complex. But we have to also understand how we operate as human beings. And this is another batch of intuition about your health and resilience that is very important. Chronic stress disrupts digestion, immunity, and emotional stability. It also eats away at your white blood cell count. Adequate sleep enhances memory and consolidation and emotional regulation. People do not take sleep as serious as they need to. Sleep is one of the most important things you can do for your brain. Your brain runs your life. You need to take care of it. But if you don't sleep, you are not taking care of your brain. It's like you're a potato chip eating old fart who's 500 pounds sitting watching television. That's what you are when you don't sleep. You need to exercise your brain. The more you exercise your brain, the better the operating system gets and the better quality of life you're going to have. Here's another weird one for these people that sleep in. Morning light exposure improves your mood, reduces your risk of depression by aligning circadian rhythms. Going into the morning light in the morning is a very, very, very important element to being a peaceful human being. The other thing to understand is a human being, physical activity releases endorphins, and it's a natural antidepressant. As a matter of fact, a 20-minute walk, a 20-minute brisk walk, if you take that, is 65% of an antidepressant. Wow. Here's another thing. People who are religious or have spiritual practices often correlate with people of lower anxiety and improved resilience. Survival, religion, and spiritual practices are actually one thing that helps a human being survive because they're learning how to have faith in themselves to be able to deal with whatever comes their way, rather than sitting in their head in fear and calculating over and over and over again until they eventually stress out and die. Here's a weird one. People who live near water or green spaces experience reduced psychological distress. Another one is, as I've explained earlier, is lifelong learning and curiosity protect against cognitive decline and enhance life's meaning. The human brain can rewire itself through imagination and focused attention. We have to understand that. That is why therapy and psychology is very important. The brain is very malleable. But if you are a person who does not believe in change, who does not believe in imagination, who does not believe that you are capable of thinking differently, you're probably not going to want to go to therapy. There's also many crappy therapists, tell you the truth. But the bottom line is to try to use therapy to get beyond your human brain and rewire your brain to be more healthy is a very, very important thing to do. Here's another thing to understand about human beings. Morality is partly intuitive. People often feel judgment before reasoning it out. They just know something's wrong. It's a very important thing that our biases make us believe we're less biased than others, which is a paradox of our character. We are all very biased creatures. We are all very lazy creatures. If you want to be an intellectual person, you have got to not just sit on the idea that I'm a this or I'm a that. You need to stop labeling yourself and be a continuous work in progress. The other thing is, many people don't know how to do this, but forgiveness and self-compassion lower stress and improve long-term health. What is forgiveness? It's the ability to care about what led to a decision rather than focus on the thing that you did. If I'm trying to understand what was going on, what you were thinking, try to understand your intentions, I am a person of forgiveness. If I'm going to focus on what you did, I'm an idiot. I'm going to never forgive, and I'm going to just sit there and beat you down for the rest of your life. People that focus on what you did rather than what you were thinking, how you came about this decision, what was going on, what was the influence, what was the environment. People that care more about that are people that are filled their heart with forgiveness. And the more you're that way, the better person you become. Here's something to remember. Optimistic behavior is characterized by a general expectation of positive outcomes. Optimists typically focus on the brighter side of situations, maintain a hopeful and confident attitude towards future events because they are faith based. Everything in life is faith based. Going to the grocery store, getting in your car, buying a new house, taking a job, having children, getting married, going to work, buying a Starbucks. Everything is a leap of faith. You don't always know what you're going to get, but you have to know that you will deal with it as it comes. That is what we have to learn. That is why religion is such an important factor. It teaches you how to live in faith, how to believe in yourself, how to believe that you can handle things that you think you cannot handle. This optimistic type of behavior leads to higher levels of resilience in the face of adversity, as optimists tend to view challenges as temporary and surmountable, not insurmountable. Their positive outlook enhances mental and physical well-being. It also fosters stronger social relationships and a greater sense of self-satisfaction. People that are trusting involves a willingness to rely on the actions and intentions of others. That means I don't always trust you, but I'm willing to have faith in you. If you operate from faith, I have faith in you. You are on the bridge to trust. If you're a person who asks for someone to have faith in you, you're on the bridge to trust. This is a very important factor in forgiveness. This is a very important factor in healing, is understanding that most people have trouble with trust. To ask somebody to trust you is the dumbest thing on the planet. Ask people to have faith in you. That is what we need. That is the basis of all relationships. All right. That's our show. I want to thank you for listening. I love hearing from you. You can do that on our webpage, voiceamericamedia.com or libsyn, libsyn.com, Dr. Gary Bell's Absurd Psychology. Now remember, the human tongue has unique prints like fingers. Also, proof that there is intelligent life in the universe is that it doesn't try to contact us. Also, the human's happiness is very suspicious. Thank you for listening, everybody.